All right, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Youth Room podcast. I'm Keith and this is Ryne. Today we're going to be talking about bridging that gap from youth ministry to those college age students that are graduating out of your ministry. So stay tuned. Now, Ryne, we've both graduated from youth ministry, so to speak, as students.
You did?
Mine much further back than yours.
Oh.
But I remember when I left my small youth group, I was part of a church plant. We didn't even have a paid youth leader or anything that led our youth ministry. But I remember leaving, and it was a weird feeling, because you're going from the teenage years into the college years. And do I feel part of the youth group still somehow? Do I, feel part of the larger church? Like, what does that mean for me now as I'm entering these new seasons? We go through this every year now as youth leaders where we graduate out our seniors. Some of them are more excited to leave than others, and some of them are more excited to try to stay than others, which I've noticed. So what's your take on this? Like, what are some things that you've felt that has been a challenge to kind of give the seniors the boot, so to speak, but still ensure that they are connected to a church and to that? And of course, there's so many variables there, right? Because they could be going to college away, they could be staying locally for college, they could be going to the workforce, military, all these different things, having a gap year, all these different things. So what are some things that you found in your ministry that have been helpful as they navigate those transitions?
Yeah, well, when it came to challenges, that you kind of took the words out of my mouth. It's kind of that idea of like when kids go away for college, it's kind of like, well, what do we kind of do? What's our role now? And our role changes. Our role flips. Our role, instead of being a shepherd who is consistently walking with them day by day, I think our role kind of looks towards helping them find other shepherds who will walk with them and things like that. And so I think that's a big part of youth ministry, is understanding that if we get this viewpoint of they're our kids and we are the sole disciplers in their life, then we have done them a disservice. It's like, no, we are disciplers for a time in your life, and we'll always be here, of course, whenever you need anything.
Yep.
But that's why it's so important in youth ministry to already make sure that their connection to God is not through us, and making sure that we are cultivating their own relationship with the Lord. And so I think it's challenging when kids, some of them stay and go to community college or trade school or start the workforce. Some of them go away to college, and it's not clean cut like, okay, well, you're all staying, so here's what we're going to do. Or you're all going to college, so when you come home on summer break, here's what we're going to do.
Yep.
It's kind of such an individual, a case-by-case basis. But I think one of the biggest things is we need to start that transition long before high school graduation.
Definitely.
We need them to see themselves as a part of the church from the time they enter our youth ministry, and not just keep prolonging adolescence as the culture has done, and say, okay, well, you're in kids ministry. Well, now you're in youth ministry. Well, now you're a young adult. Well, now you're a young married. Well, now you're a young family. Well, and we just keep going and going and going. And I'm not saying that, we don't like being around people our own age, or there's not, don't hang out.
There's a place for that, but maybe supplemental, not replacement for the body of Christ.
Yeah. And so I think helping them to be a part of that church and know they're a part of the church from a young age really helps that, because then it's not, I'm graduating out of a church within a church and I go into, big church and I'm like, what do I do? This isn't, what I'm used to. So I think number one, helping them to see themselves as part of the church younger. And that might look like maybe changing Sunday morning programming around. That might look like getting them more involved in whatever, adult ministries you have at a younger age, and fighting for their right to kind of be there.
Yep.
But I think also, starting that crossover in youth ministry as well, bringing in adults who are in the church into youth ministry that they can make connections with and build, so that way when they do graduate out, it's not, I only know the youth leaders, I don't know anybody else. It's they've already started to build those connections. So I think just making that more of a gradual transition rather than this week you're in your group, next week go join a Bible study.
Yeah. And hopefully those questions have been answered as far as like what's next, throughout the time. And of course, we're never perfect. Like I feel like, this is the first senior class since I've been back on staff with McLean, where I've had the whole year with them, and because I started back on staff about 18 months ago, and so with that we have I still feel like I didn't handle that transition as well as I could, even knowing what I do, as far as like, having several different generations of seniors that have graduated out. One of the things that I think we've shifted, as a church, even when I first started, back in 2008, was we saw the youth ministry program as like almost like a church within a church in almost an unhealthy way. And of course, like it wasn't that we were intentionally trying to distance that, but what we found was when students graduated out of our student ministry, which is called the Rock, it was like they didn't know what it was like to be part of our church, like because we had basically created a church for them. So we did simultaneous youth services during the same services as our adult congregation. And then we even had like a whole strategy for what we called in-reach, where we would like place people like as teenagers were walking into our main sanctuary and saying, hey, like we have a youth service downstairs for you. Like almost like you're not really serious about your faith unless you're going to our youth service. And of course we didn't like say it like that, but there was a whole strategy. It's like, no, you need to be with other teenagers, during these years to learn and to, to grow and not just sit under, the teaching of the main. And our focus has shifted so drastically over the years in a very healthy way, I'm convinced, to introduce, from kids ministry. Like we only do kind of like we call it middle school community during one of our services now on Sunday mornings, so that there's an opportunity for them to attend, a service with their family and then come here, for middle school community. And then there's nothing for high school students, as far as the service they can serve, in our middle school community. But we're intentional with that because we don't want them to graduate and be like, I was never part of this church because I was only part of the Rock. And then now that I can't be part of the Rock, I'm not attached anywhere else. So we've been strategic about that, especially since COVID, to really, adjust some of our programming to reflect like, hey, you're a part of the church now. You're not the future church. You're the church now. How can we include you into, our discipleship groups and church groups and our services, as a whole, not just segregate you out to, just student ministry for your whole time. So also when you're talking about bridging that gap or creating a crossover, it's important for them to establish relationships with other adults in the church that may serve in other areas too. So it's not siloed out where the only experience of church is within your youth ministry. And of course, that's not always clean cut because you have students that only come to your youth ministry, I'm sure, right? I mean, we do too. Yeah. They don't even attend our church.
And that's why it's even more important to bring adults from the church in as well. So that way, they can continue that relationship, because that's what I was thinking too. It's like if a kid doesn't come to Sunday morning service, they just come to youth ministry. It's more important that you are bringing the adults into youth ministry so that they can be that one to kind of invest in them once they go and say, hey, why don't you come, to Sunday morning service with me? I'd love to have you. And we've seen success in that.
Yeah. And also, we talked about this before about really creating an environment of connection within the upperclassmen, like to where they're solidifying the relationships. And we know, like the saying, it's like programs get people keep people. And so if we want to stay connected to the body of Christ, and that was part of your experience too, as you graduated out of your youth ministry as a teenager. Tell us a little about that. Like what was such a connecting factor within your group of seniors that graduated out?
Yeah. So there was probably 10 of us, I think, that probably graduated in my class. And we had been together, most of us, from sixth grade on. And first thing, that kind of stands out that I think every youth leader maybe might find some solace in is there were some great parents in that class. And so this isn't necessarily something that we can do on our own, right? Like it takes, quality parents and families who decide that, hey, we're going to invest in this for us in order to be able to be, some of the benefactors of that. But really we had a lot of experiences together. And I know we're going to do a later podcast about the importance of creating moments. And I think that is a huge one in terms of this. Is when I go back out of my high school memories, I don't necessarily remember my school memories. I remember my youth group memories of the things that we did together and the things that, the fun that we had. And so when we spent all, when youth group ended, like we were going over to each other's houses on a Wednesday night and just sitting around, like hanging out. When one of us had a game, we were all going to their game. And we had just developed that relationship because we had been poured into, and all the events, we were always together. And so when we graduated, we were like, hey, we're all going off to different schools in different states, but we're still all friends. So let's just keep doing this. And so when we came home, we hung out together. We we went to the young adult class together. We went to events together. We did things together, and that continued on. And we were the best men in each other's wedding. And I just that those relationships still continue today, just because those were the people when hard times hit or when things were going on. It was like, this was my community who I knew really cared about me, and our leaders did a job of cultivating that.
Yeah, and so as we, like you said, we're going to cover this in a later episode of creating those moments that that kind of create those bonds. But I think we shouldn't dismiss the social aspect of that connection, being part of the body of Christ, like here, and really, I think that's what some of our teenagers experience, and that's why they want to stay. Like they want to stay. And so, what would you say to students that have graduated, that are sticking around? Maybe they're going to community college or joining the workforce, that want to stay in your youth ministry.
I would say that kind of that point where it's like, we don't want to prolong adolescence. It's like, hey, our culture seems to want to say, just keep staying young, keep staying young, keep staying young. And so I think as a church, sometimes that's a hard one, because I've learned too, there has to be some give and take. Whereas church, we're just like, no, you're 18, you're an adult. It's like, okay, but a 22-year-old right now is like, I want, I'm looking for relationships. I'm looking for friendships. I'm looking for fun. And we have to have some flexibility in that. Of course, the gospel is the main point. But to that person, you want to say, hey, we're going to draw a clear boundary. And so, okay, if you're going to have to meet the same qualifications as, any other adult would, it's not going to be well, you served in our youth ministry, or you went in our youth ministry. Yeah, we've got some questions, but sure, we'll take you. It's like, no, there's got to be the spiritual maturity there. And then two, I know that we're lockstep in this, where it's like, okay, you're not going to serve with the class below you who you hung out with, and all of them remember the dumb thing you did at camp, like last summer. It's like, hey, we're going to drop you down, and you're going to be serving with the younger kids. So there's a maturity gap there. But I think understanding it's like, there has to be, it's the same standards for you as it is with anybody else.
Exactly. And I think that's a conversation that, we should be able to speak into their lives, where, we say, hey, listen, for your sake. It's kind of like my kid who, doesn't want to be potty trained. It's like, because it's hard. Yeah. It's like, but you need to be potty trained. Like that, this is the next step in your life. Yeah. Like you need to move up. Like you need to, but that approach like that, where it's like, hey, for your own sake, we need to draw some clear boundaries, where you can't just be part of the youth group anymore and just attend or hang out with high schoolers. You're now, an adult. Yeah. And to say, this is just not healthy for you long-term to be here. Included in this. Now, there are some that we have some seniors that are graduating that are phenomenal. Like they were, and we've been kind of building them as leaders. They've served as co-leaders in our, different middle school opportunities and stuff. And so, so it's a no-brainer where it's like, hey, if you're sticking around this year, as an adult leader, we're going to still go through the same process as as an adult leader for anybody else. So we're not going to give you special attention just because you grew up in our ministry or that you've been here for the past couple of years. But we are going to create that gap of who you're serving with and make it clear that hey, you're not just, going to be hanging around high schoolers. You're going to be investing in the middle schoolers so that there's a, 5-6 year gap between that. And that's worked out well for us. We've had students that have graduated from ministry that have stuck around, that are now serving and doing a great job because of that. But we had to be very intentional about creating those boundaries and what's healthy for them, to not just stick around because they feel like it. Yeah. And then we have some students that want to stick around, but they're just not really qualified as a leader at this point in their lives, and which doesn't disqualify them long term, but just say, hey, these are some steps we'd like to see in your life where you would be an exemplary model for our students in the future. Yeah. But here's a way that you can connect with, a young adult ministry, or, get into an adult church group, or, small group or discipleship group, or D group or E group or F group, or whatever you call it at your church.
Hopefully don't call it an F group. That would,
I think that one might be a new one. Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, whatever you call it at your church, cell groups, fellowship groups. I mean, we could literally come up with something with every letter of the alphabet, probably, with different names of churches.
We call them core groups.
Core groups. See? Yeah. But that's an acronym though. CORE.
Yep. Community outreach, replication, education.
Boom. So there's intentionality there. Yep. So anyways, with that, we have, it should be a group of seniors that are graduating. We want to connect the dots for them clearly, present some clear boundaries, because it's for their sake. It's for them to ultimately to thrive in this next season of their life, to kind of leave and cleave, Talk about the college students that are going away to college. what's the best way to help them succeed in their faith and to stay connected, to Jesus as they go into a different season where they're going to be a lot more temptation. They're not going to be having that safety net of their parents to make decisions for them. What are your thoughts on that? How would you encourage a college student to really live out their faith in college?
Yeah, we need to do our research on campus ministries and local churches in college towns. And so one of the things that we've done for all of our students is if they're going away to college, we do our research ahead of time, and I go and try and find churches in that community. Now, there's a temptation here to just get them connected to a campus ministry. And don't get me wrong, a good campus ministry will connect them with a local church.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's a tendency in college just to get connected to a campus ministry and lose the local church aspect. And we need both and actually biblically, we need the local church more than we need a campus ministry. But we need to do our due diligence looking at faith statements and statements of beliefs. And what I try and do is text kids ahead of time and be like, hey, I just was looking online. Here's a couple churches that I would recommend. Here are the service times. Like, hey, I'd love to hear from you, when you go to one. And I've never had a kid be like upset or annoyed that I've done that. They've always been appreciative of that. And then campus ministries too, get them connected with it. Hopefully, once you've done this for a while, you can kind of create a little bit of a pipeline. I think of a story of when I just graduated, there was a student a couple of years younger than me named Hunter, and he ended up going to an in-state college that my wife had graduated from. And so we had, before he set foot on campus, we had given his number to somebody in Crew, and they reached out to him, and so he got engaged like right away with a Bible study. Ended up leading Bible studies through it, and just really, really cool to see that. And so I think leveraging kids that you already have on campus who are walking with Christ. But I think once you develop those relationships with some of those campus ministries, then really saying, hey, don't get settled in and then go find Christian community, because that's the temptation. It's like, well, I'm just going to take a couple weeks and kind of figure it out, and then I'm going to do this. And it's like, right away. No, that needs to be priority number one, because we've both been in college. I think we could probably speak to, it's as crazy as it sounds, most of the time the friends you make in your first 2 or 3 weeks are the friends that you hang out with for 4 years, which it's just a weird kind of way that it works. And very often does that break. And so I think just helping them to understand, look, if you get the first 2 weeks right, it's gonna go, a lot better.
Narrow
for
window
you.
there. And that's I've heard some stats on that too, where it's like college, college students that live out their faith in the college years, they have that common denominator of getting connected to a campus ministry or local church like within the first few weeks being there. Yeah. And so with that, we have I think we have some responsibility there just to connect the dots for them, again, just to also set expectations. So we have just because they've had a great experience like with our church, like they might not find the exact church in their college, because they might be going to a college that has like 1 or 2 churches near them. So it's not like they're going to have a huge selection where they're finding the exact. So to kind of, pop that expectation bubble of like the exact expectation of what you've experienced here is going to be how you're going to experience church every, so to have that.
Or that the first one you go to is going to be the one that God has.
Yeah. And so to just say like, hey, give this a really good evaluation and shot. These are the things that you should look for in a church. Like, are they preaching the gospel? Are they, actively, sending people on mission? Like, are they, teaching biblical, foundational truths like that are not contradictory to the word. And so in other words, help them evolve. So instead of just going and look at their faith statement for yourselves, like, and say, go to this church. It's like, well, this is what I would be looking for on their website, or, like the first like Sunday that I visit, like what are some things that we would look for in a healthy church. And so anyway, so to help them set that expectation that they're not going to find the exact church, that's exactly like yours, just in another town.
Yeah.
And but then also to know what to look for, so that they're not walking into this, like a cult or something where they're like, because we actually had a student, as part of his testimony now. So he ended up, turning out okay, but he came to Christ. He was a fairly new believer in our ministry as like a senior, and then went off to college and got connected to a cult. But he didn't know it was at first, because they were like pursuing him through like this, Bible study, whatever, and got involved with that for a little bit, but then realized like a year into it that it was like, oh my goodness, this is nothing like what, I came to faith. And then, but that's part of his like testimony now, where he knows the ins and outs of like how they approach people and how they, talk to people under the guise of, hey, we're Christians, but we're just a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So with that, yeah, make sure you're understanding, like, and setting expectations of what to look for in a healthy church and what to look for in a doctrinal statement and faith statement, all that stuff. Okay, so moving on to rapid fire questions. Do you have a favorite college memory?
I have a most memorable college memory.
It's not your favorite memory, though.
Well, when I think of favorite, like, I mean, I
have like a serious, like, I can answer this question serious, like, where it's like, because I went to a Bible college, so it's like,
yeah, there's no fun there.
Well, I mean, there was some like really spiritual, like,
Yes.
momentous things that happened,
Yeah,
at college for me.
I think not one like particular moment stand out, but I had we went to a small church plant, and the pastor and his wife, Gene and Ann Mims, they took us out to eat every Sunday afternoon. Mm-hmm. And so just getting to spend time sitting underneath their wisdom was honestly one of the things I looked forward to the most. And there was a group of us who would all go together, and it was like 35 minutes from campus. So we all drove there together. And then, so it, not like one particular moment, but when I think back on like some of my most, favorable moments in college, like just getting to spend some times with them and just kind of pick their brains as people who are kind of spiritual giants in my life was really cool to get to do.
Yeah. So I had, one of my favorite memories. So I minored in outdoor leadership. So I majored in youth ministry and then minored in outdoor leadership, which is kind of using the outdoors as a teaching medium. So camp ministry, like leading backpacking trips, all that stuff. And part of that, it was very experiential, meaning like we would learn how to lead a backpacking trip by going on a backpacking trip, and then each of us had responsibilities, to lead the whole group for 12-hour shift, or whatever. And the final exam for that outdoor leadership minor was a trip to Honey Rock, Wisconsin, which is owned by Wheaton, and it was in December. So North Woods of Wisconsin in December. We're talking like
lovely
0 to 10 degrees during the day and like negative 10 at night. So it was winter backpacking, and it was an experiential trip.
Yeah,
we learned a lot about our bodies. We had to eat so much fat to just stay warm. Like we had to have 2 what we called hot wets. Like we had to drink hot liquid twice a day to keep our body temperature up. And so, I mean, just the hard skills of that was like one thing, but the soft skills of just learning leadership when you're not feeling well and when you're, so there was one girl on our trip, and they had a leader from Honey Rock that joined us, to help her out, but she got a nasty cold, like while we were on this trip, and we were all sitting around the fire, and we had to go break ice, dip water out of the lake, bring it up to boil our water, like for our meals and for our drinking water every day. So we boiled it over the fire with a tin can. And so we're sitting there like, I'm about to fix our breakfast. We just woke up, hardly ever slept, like, cause it was so cold. And we're all sitting around the fire, and we're just, it was like silent. Like we were just kind of like staring at the fire, like trying to stay warm while our water was heating up. And she blew her nose and then threw the tissue into the fire, and it landed in our water. And we knew how much work it had taken up until that point to get that water to the fire. Like we had to, break the ice. We had to dip it out. Like we had to. And so we all kind of like looked around each other, and we're like, it's going to boil.
Oh.
So we fished out what we, could see of the tissue. And I mean, you kill all the germs when the boiling water. So, but every time we took a sip of whatever we were drinking, I don't remember what it was. It was like, I don't remember, but, you kind of felt something hit your lip, and you're wondering, was that slime? Was that snot? Yeah. But anyways, that was one of my favorite memories, was that trip. Not that specific.
One of my favorite memories was drinking one of my classmates' snot.
Yeah. So anyways, that was an experience to just roll with it, man. Just, sometimes, but it was funny because we all looked at each other like we know what we're all thinking, and we all know what kind of work it took to get there. And we're just like, we're going to just let it boil. Just let it boil. So sometimes you got to let it boil.
We should make a t-shirt.
Yeah. Just let it boil.
Just boil it.
Just let it boil. Yeah. All right. So worst college memory. That could probably qualify for maybe one of my worst college memories.
Yeah. But, okay.
So worst college memory.
This one's easy. So we were at conference tournament my sophomore year. and we were in small town, Columbia, Tennessee. Shout out Mule Day. If you know, you know. And we were there, and two of my teammates decided that they were going to steal a troller motor from Walmart, boat motor. And we learned that week that Walmart has very good security cameras. And so they went back to Walmart to get something else, and Walmart immediately detected their faces as having stolen the troller motor earlier in the week. And so they dispatched their entire police force in this town to find these two kids who stole a troller motor. And they were wearing team-issued gear when they did it. And so the cops eventually found out the hotel we were staying at. These two kids ran, so they were hiding in the town.
Yeah.
And they were going door to door at the hotel where other teams are staying, holding up pictures of kids in our team issued gear. And of course, we all knew the other schools.
Yeah.
Going, have you seen these kids? And they're like, no. But then the best part is then they got to our team rooms, saying, have you seen these kids? Do you know where
you're wearing the same jerseys?
Wearing the same shirts. And our kids are going, no.
Never seen them in my life.
And so eventually they got cuffed and stuffed, and we all were standing looking out.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Cuffed and stuffed? What does that mean?
Handcuffed and stuffed in the back of a police car.
Oh, okay.
You know? And
I was thinking like they put like gags in their mouth or something. Like I was confused by the stuffed part, not the cuffed part. Okay.
And so we're all standing out, like looking out our back windows as there's 9 police cruisers and these kids getting put in the back of the cop cars. And we're all like, oh my word, like we have to go play a game. Like, what is our coach going to say? And our coach he was a character. And so he's like, all right, team meeting in the parking lot in like 15 minutes. We all got on our phones. We're like, oh, great. Like, what is he going to say? And we get down there, and literally this is the entirety of the team meeting. He goes, with a few choice words, he goes, didn't need him anyway. Bus leaves in 2 hours. And that was it. So we were like, okay.
Which sounds like a baseball coach.
Yeah. So that was like my worst college memory in terms of like, I was like, oh my word, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah.
But looking back, it was one that stands out quite a bit.
It's good.
Yeah.
So we, I mentioned that I went to Bible college, which we didn't have a lot to do. Like there wasn't like, we couldn't even have, at the point when I was there, we couldn't have TVs. But we had internet and stuff, but it wasn't like we couldn't have actual like TVs with like cable or anything. Like there wasn't anything like that.
For real?
For real. But yeah, but we could watch stuff online, like, which was kind of ironic. But at the time, they blamed it on the facility. They said that it couldn't support that much electricity. Having everybody had a TV and like a computer. And
do you think
they've rebuilt?
Was that the real reason you think?
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't complaining. Like I didn't hardly watch TV anyways, but we could watch movies and stuff like on a computer, monitor, but not an actual TV.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, anyway,
just trying to get over this.
It's a different time. This is a long time ago as well. But I think they now have adjusted that, because they've remodeled the dorms and such.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think they've supported that. But anyway, so because of that, we pulled a lot of pranks, and they got a little disgusting, like really disgusting actually, to the point where there was like a competition. And when I tell people this, like it didn't seem like that it was that weird then, but when I tell people this, and even when I look back, I'm like, that was so gross. We had competitions to see who could have the darkest pee. Like we wouldn't drink water for days so that we could have the darkest pee, and you had to verify it by showing it to someone. So everybody would be peeing in cups and stuff and showing people. So anyway, so this kind of like became a thing, which is incredibly unhealthy, by the way. It's probably why most of the guys that I roomed with have now died from kidney failure.
There you go.
No, I'm just kidding. But but then there was a thing where it's like, okay, we're doing this competition. How can we utilize the dark pee to pull pranks as well? And so then it was a thing where they would, yes, this is the things that people come up with. So they would actually,
why you need TV.
So they would take a plate and they would pour a little of the dark brown pee onto the plate and freeze it overnight. So it was like a disc of pee. And then they would go and they would slide it under people's doors, because their doors were locked at night while they're sleeping, so they wouldn't pull pranks on them. Slide it under their doors so that it would melt overnight, and the first thing they'd step in is their dark pee, is the dark pee. And so anyways, all that to say, that was some of the worst stuff that we went through. It was pretty disgusting.
And I played college baseball with guys, and I'm finding that disgusting. Which
I'm sure you had some interesting stories too. But all that to say is we had some not so proud prank moments where one kid I'm not even gonna mention what he did, but he was expelled from the school for it because it was such a disgusting prank. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, all that to say, that was one of my worst college memories. The moment you realized that you were old in youth ministry. I feel like this is a targeted question to me. Do you feel old in youth ministry? You don't feel old, do you?
There's some days. We were doing trivia for our graduates, and it's 2006 trivia. And the question was, what social media company was started in 2006?
Yeah.
Which the answer is Twitter.
Which I would have guessed YouTube.
Now,
YouTube was 2004, or is that 2008?
YouTube was bought by Google in 2006, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know when.
Wow, we need to look that up.
Anyways,
I thought it was younger.
I don't know, but yeah. So, but the answer was Twitter, and their guesses. Some of them were guessing like Snapchat, and I was like, no.
Some of them were like, I wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, no. Yeah. The majority of our kids were not born yet. Like only our seniors had been born, and they were born in 2006. And it was like the fact that they thought Snapchat was invented in like 2006. I was like, no, we didn't have like smartphones.
So that was the moment when you felt old?
Yeah.
All right. So I felt like I was delaying this for so long. Like now when I first had students that I discipled in our ministry that weren't born yet when I started youth ministry, that's when I kind of felt like, man, this is sinking in a little bit. But more recently, so just in the past couple of weeks, I made the mistake of asking our students and younger adult leaders to guess my age. And that's when I really felt it. I was like,
to be fair,
they were overestimating my age by a lot. They thought I was much, much older.
What was the highest guess?
47.
You're not 47?
I'm not 47 yet. Yeah. So I'm 39.
Yeah.
I'm approaching 40, but it wasn't even that they're like 40. You know, sometimes kids don't even know like a reference point or whatever. So it's like I wasn't too concerned about that, but we had someone that was like, well, there's no way you're in your 30s anymore. Like there's just no way. And I was like, I'm 39. They're like, that's crazy. That was their response, and I was like, okay, yeah, that made me feel a little bit older than I actually am. So that was the moment that I realized I was an old many years ago, but more recently kind of hit home again, you know. And yeah, okay. So 1 minute questions as we close. So do you have your timer out? And I'm curious to know your answer on this. I mean, I think you can answer with one word pretty much, but I want you to expound on this because you have a whole minute.
Yep.
So 1 minute on the timer. And the question is, will heaven be boring?
So I think people ask this question because they kind of believe the cartoons of sitting on clouds and playing harps. That will not be what heaven will be like. In fact, we who have trusted in Christ will not spend eternity in heaven as it exists now. We will spend eternity on the new earth and the new heaven. And so my thought is that it will be a lot more like God originally created this world, of course, with no sin. And when you think about that, there's endless possibilities of, things that we could be doing. But I don't want to downplay the fact that we will be with God in perfect community with him for all eternity. And I think the tendency is to think, well, we'll do that for a couple of days. And it's like, I don't think we really understand, God. And I think that alone will last us for all eternity. So no, I believe heaven will be anything but boring.
Very good answer.
Thank you.
Very, very good. Okay. So I'm trying to find a verse to be prepared. Yes. Okay. I've got it. For this next question. So do you have a timer on the clock? A clock?
I will start it on the question. All right.
Go ahead.
Keith, do I have to be baptized in order to be saved?
So the short answer is you do not have to be baptized to be saved. However, a lot of people are misguided in believing that you do based on one primary verse, which is found in Mark 16, verse 16. It says, whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And on the surface, this seems to be communicating that whoever believes and is baptized, that little, and is baptized will be saved. That would communicate that you need to be baptized. People point to the reference of Acts where every time the believer is, gave their life to Christ, they're baptized immediately right after that. And that just really shows to, from the commitment to Christ, not necessarily the act of baptism is what saves us. But the second part of that verse kind of disproves that first part where it says, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And it doesn't say whoever does not believe and doesn't be baptized will be condemned. So there seems to be a connection with belief in Christ, obviously, and not being baptized as a work of salvation.
Yeah. 59 seconds. You're getting better. I'm proud of you.
Getting better. I'm trying to be more concise. I had to look at the clock a couple times to make sure, but that's the answer to the question in a minute. So that concludes our episode for today. If you've received value from this, we would appreciate you guys sharing and liking and commenting and doing all the things that helps other people see our content. This podcast is always sponsored by Edge Club, which we exist to connect students to Jesus and to the local church, primarily through training students to be student missionaries to their local middle school and high school campuses. If you want to use our training, it's edgeclub.org/training. And you can check out that. We also have put together a resource vault for gospel advancing ministry leaders like yourselves. And you can go to edgeclub.org/vault to experience and sign up for that. It's all free. Our training is free and our resource vault is free, just so that you can use it and utilize it and benefit other people. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.